There is a question that very few people have the courage to ask themselves. If so many people work hard every single day, why do so few truly prosper? You look around and see men and women waking up early, facing traffic, working long hours, dealing with pressure, responsibilities, bills, and yet years go by and their financial situation seems practically the same. Meanwhile, a small group seems to live at a different pace. They grow. They accumulate assets. They invest. They multiply opportunities. And many times, they don't even seem to work more than everyone else. For a long time, the most common explanation for this was oversimplified. Some say it's luck. Others say it's talent. Some claim it's inheritance or privilege. But one of the richest men in history had a completely different perspective on this. Andrew Carnegie. Born in Scotland into an extremely poor family, Carnegie started working while he was still a child. He was not born into wealth. He did not inherit an empire. In fact, his childhood was marked by constant financial hardship. When his family decided to immigrate to the United States, they arrived with almost no money. Carnegie began his professional life as a worker in a cotton factory. Later, he got a job as a messenger at a telegraph company. Nothing in his early trajectory suggested that this boy would one day become one of the richest men on the planet. But something began to happen to Carnegie as he observed the world around him. He began to notice a pattern, a silent pattern, a pattern that separated two types of people. And it had nothing to do with physical effort. In fact, many of the people who worked harder than he did remained stuck in the same place for decades, while others, often with less physical effort, advanced rapidly. Carnegie began studying these people. He observed how they thought, how they made decisions, what kinds of questions they asked, and most importantly, how they saw opportunities. That was when he realized something that would completely change the way he lived his life. Most people do not fail because they don't work hard enough. They fail because of an invisible mindset, a way of thinking that seems normal, but that, in practice, completely blocks any real possibility of prosperity. This mindset is so common that many people do not even realize they are trapped in it. In fact, they believe they are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. Work hard. Fulfill responsibilities. Be disciplined. Be responsible. But even doing all of this, their results remain limited. Carnegie used to say the problem was not effort. It was focus. Most people concentrate all their energy on solving immediate problems, paying bills, completing tasks, putting out daily fires. They live reacting to the present. And when all your attention is trapped in the present, you never build the future. This is one of the first major blocks to prosperity, the survival mindset. When someone lives in this mental state, every decision is based on urgency. They choose jobs only for the immediate paycheck. They accept opportunities that solve the month but build nothing lasting. They avoid risks that could open bigger doors, because the fear of losing the little they have seems greater than the desire to grow. This kind of mindset creates an extremely difficult cycle to break, because the longer someone lives focused only on surviving, the less time and energy remain to build something greater. Carnegie realized this very early. Even when he was still just a messenger, he did something that few of his coworkers did. While others simply delivered messages and went home at the end of the day, Carnegie observed. He studied. He paid attention to the conversations of businessmen. He tried to understand how businesses worked, who made the decisions, who truly controlled the money. He was not just working. He was learning how the system worked. And that created a huge difference, because most people spend years working inside a system without ever trying to understand it. They know how to execute tasks, but they do not understand how the game really works. Carnegie began to notice something that very few people realize. There is a huge difference between participating in a system and owning a system. Most people sell their time. They work hours. They receive money. And they repeat this process indefinitely. But those who prosper begin to search for something different. They look to build structures, systems that continue generating value even when they are not working directly. That is how Carnegie began to think. He constantly asked himself, How could this work without me? That question is powerful because it completely changes the kind of decisions you make. When someone thinks only about work, the question is, how much will I earn from this? But when someone begins thinking about real prosperity, the question becomes, does this build something that can grow? This change may seem small, but in practice, it changes a person's financial destiny. Because making money and building wealth are two different things. Making money depends on your effort. Building wealth depends on your strategy. Carnegie used to say that most people spend their entire lives trying to earn more money, when they should be trying to build something greater than their own effort. And this is where one of the most dangerous mindsets that prevents prosperity appears: the salary mindset. There is nothing wrong with having a salary, but something becomes very dangerous when a salary becomes the only mental model of income a person knows. When that happens, the person begins to believe that the only way to make more money is to work more hours. But there is a physical limit to that. The day has 24 hours. The body gets tired. The mind becomes exhausted. And even if someone works extremely hard, their income remains limited by time. Carnegie realized this by observing businessmen and investors. They were not trapped by an hourly limit because their money came from structures, companies, industries, investments, ownership, systems that continued operating regardless of their presence. This realization was fundamental because it completely changed Carnegie's objective. He no longer wanted simply to earn more. He wanted to participate in something that could grow without depending directly on his time. That way of thinking was the beginning of the transformation that would later lead Carnegie to build one of the greatest industrial empires in history. But before that happened, he had to confront another extremely common mindset. A mindset that destroys more opportunities than any economic crisis. The mindset of fear disguised as prudence. This mindset appears when someone begins to justify their stagnation with apparently rational arguments. They say things like, "Now is not the right time. This is too risky. I prefer security. Maybe in the future." These phrases sound prudent, but many times they hide something much deeper. Fear of change. Fear of trying something new. Fear of failure. Carnegie realized that many people were trapped in this state. They wanted to prosper, but at the same time, they avoided any movement that could actually take them there. He realized that a person's mental environment can determine the limits of what they believe is possible. This happens silently, almost imperceptibly, because the ideas we hear every day eventually shape the way we see the world. If someone spends most of their time surrounded by people who constantly complain about the economy, criticize those who prosper, or claim that financial growth is almost impossible, that vision begins to feel natural. Over time, that person starts to believe that prosperity is something rare, almost inaccessible, something reserved for a few. But when Andrew Carnegie began to interact with entrepreneurs, investors, and industrial builders, he noticed something completely different. These people talked about opportunities, about expansion, about new markets, about projects that did not even exist yet. While many saw problems, they saw possibilities. This contrast had a huge impact on Carnegie's mind, because he realized that two people can look at the exact same situation and see completely different realities. One sees risk. The other sees potential. One sees difficulty. The other sees opportunity. The difference is not in the external world. It is in how the mind has been trained to interpret the world. Carnegie began to understand that prosperity does not begin in the pocket. It begins in the mind. Before any wealth is built in the physical world, it must first exist as a possibility in someone's mind. If a person deeply believes they will never prosper, all of their decisions eventually reinforce that belief. They avoid risks, avoid change, avoid new environments, avoid learning things outside their routine. And without realizing it, they continue repeating the same patterns for years. Carnegie decided to do the exact opposite. He began to carefully choose the kind of people he spent his time with. He sought conversations that stimulated growth, ideas that expanded his vision, projects that challenged his abilities. This was not just a social change. It was a strategic change, because Carnegie realized that ideas are contagious. Just as pessimism spreads, ambition spreads as well. Vision spreads. Determination spreads. And when someone spends enough time in an environment where growth is considered normal, their mind begins to operate on another level. But there is something even deeper in this transformation. Carnegie realized that prosperity requires something most people avoid: responsibility. Not just responsibility for tasks or daily obligations, but responsibility for one's own life. This means stopping the habit of attributing every result to external circumstances, to the economy, to the government, to luck, to a lack of opportunities. Of course, external factors exist. They influence things. But Carnegie believed that focusing only on those factors creates a mental trap. Because when someone believes everything depends on things outside their control, they also believe there is little they can do. And that belief completely eliminates initiative. The person stops searching for new paths, stops studying possibilities, stops trying. Carnegie used to say that prosperity begins the moment someone takes control of their own direction. Even under imperfect conditions, even in difficult environments, even with limited resources, that decision changes everything. Because from that moment on, the person stops asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begins asking, "What can I do with this?" This shift in question completely changes behavior. It activates creativity. It activates initiative. It activates learning. And these three forces are what create real opportunities over time. But there is another extremely powerful mental block that Carnegie identified. A block that prevents many people from prospering even when they have the ability. The need for approval. Many people make decisions based on what others will think. They avoid different projects, avoid bold ideas, avoid unconventional paths, because they fear criticism, fear judgment, fear appearing naive or overly ambitious. This type of fear may seem small, but it has enormous consequences over the years, because almost all great opportunities seem strange at the beginning. When someone does something that most people have never done, the first reaction is usually doubt, skepticism, or even criticism. Carnegie understood this, and he learned to treat those reactions as a natural part of the process. He understood that if an idea feels completely comfortable to everyone around you, it probably has nothing truly innovative about it. This does not mean acting without thinking, but it means not allowing the fear of others' opinions to determine the direction of your life. This kind of mental independence is rare, but it is extremely powerful, because it allows someone to explore paths that others avoid. And very often, those are exactly the paths where the greatest opportunities appear. Over time, Carnegie began to notice something even more fascinating. Prosperity rarely happens suddenly. It is almost always the result of a sequence of decisions. Small decisions. Decisions that seem simple. But when added together over the years, they create a completely different trajectory. A decision to learn something new. A decision to observe a market carefully. A decision to participate in a project. A decision to take on greater responsibility. Each of these choices may seem small at the moment they happen, but over time they accumulate. They connect. They create new possibilities. Carnegie believed that prosperity is a cumulative process, a construction, not a single event. But there is a mindset that interrupts this process before it even truly begins. A very common mindset. The mindset of immediate gratification. This mindset appears when someone wants results too quickly. They want prosperity without going through the process. They want wealth without building it. They want success without development. And when results do not appear quickly, they give up. Carnegie saw this happen all the time. People would start projects with enthusiasm, but abandon them when they realized it might take years to reach their full potential. This kind of premature abandonment destroys more opportunities than any economic crisis, because many of the greatest achievements require time to mature, time to grow, time to consolidate. Carnegie believed that strategic patience is one of the rarest qualities in the business world. The ability to keep building even when results are not yet visible. The ability to maintain long-term vision in a world obsessed with immediate rewards. And this is exactly where many people abandon the path to prosperity. They start well. They have good ideas, good intentions, but they give up before the process has time to generate real results. And by observing this pattern repeatedly, Carnegie reached a powerful conclusion. Prosperity does not depend only on intelligence, nor only on effort. It depends on the ability to maintain the right mindset throughout the entire process. And this is exactly where one of the most important secrets of Andrew Carnegie's philosophy appears. A mental principle that he believed could completely transform the financial destiny of anyone who truly understood it. He began training his mind to think about opportunities before thinking about obstacles. This does not mean ignoring risks. It means not allowing fear to completely paralyze any attempt at growth. Andrew Carnegie believed that most opportunities that change a life seem uncertain at the beginning. They do not arrive with guarantees. They arrive with possibility. But people trapped in a survival mindset rarely manage to see that, because their eyes are trained only to detect danger, not potential. And this is exactly where many paths to prosperity are interrupted before they even begin. Because the person never gets the chance to test their own capabilities. They remain inside a mental space that feels safe, but limited. Meanwhile, those who learn how to deal with uncertainty begin to explore territories that most people never reach. But there is another detail that Andrew Carnegie considered even more important. Something that few people notice when they begin searching for prosperity. Because changing mindset is not only a matter of individual thinking. It is also a matter of environment. And it was at this point that Carnegie made one of the most powerful discoveries of his entire life. This principle was simple to understand, but extremely difficult to apply. Carnegie believed that prosperity requires a radical change in the way a person sees their own work. Most people work only to fulfill a function. They do exactly what is asked. No more, no less. They wait for their paycheck at the end of the month and repeat the process. This behavior seems normal. But Carnegie noticed something interesting. The people who grew the most inside companies were not necessarily the most intelligent, nor the ones with the best diplomas, and often not even the ones who had been there the longest. They were the ones who did something very few people did. They took responsibility beyond what was required. Carnegie called this voluntary initiative. It is when someone decides to deliver more value than they are being paid for at that moment. At first, many people criticize this behavior. They say it is naive. They say it is working for free. But Carnegie saw it in a completely different way. He said that people who do more than expected begin to learn things that others never learn. They begin to see the internal functioning of systems. They begin to develop skills that others never develop. And most importantly, they begin to become indispensable. This difference is powerful, because while most people are only trying to keep their position, this person is transforming themselves into someone difficult to replace. Carnegie applied this principle in his own life. When he worked as a telegraph messenger, he did not simply deliver messages. He began studying how the operators worked. He learned to identify telegraph signals just by listening to the sound of the machines, without looking, something very few people could do. This caught the attention of his superiors, and shortly after, he was promoted to operator. That promotion did not come simply because of time spent working. It came because he had prepared himself before the opportunity appeared. This is another pattern Carnegie noticed throughout his life. Opportunities rarely appear for those who are not yet prepared. They appear for those who are already ready, even if no one asked. This type of mindset creates an enormous advantage. Because while many people wait for recognition before improving themselves, people who prosper do the opposite. They improve first. They develop first. They position themselves first. And when an opportunity appears, they are already prepared to seize it. Carnegie believed that this attitude creates something extremely valuable: trust. When someone consistently shows that they can solve problems, assume responsibility, and learn quickly, other people begin to trust them. And trust is one of the most powerful currencies in the business world, because opportunities almost always arise through people. Someone recommends you. Someone invites you. Someone trusts you. And those who build a solid reputation over time are remembered in those moments. But there is another aspect of this mindset that Carnegie considered fundamental: the ability to continuously learn. He believed that one of the greatest traps in professional life is the feeling that we already know enough. When someone reaches that point, growth almost stops. Carnegie never stopped studying. Even after becoming extremely wealthy, he read constantly. He talked with specialists. He observed different industries. He tried to understand trends. This habit kept his mind constantly open to new possibilities. While many people remain trapped in a single way of doing things, those who continue learning begin to see new paths, new markets, new ideas, and this creates an advantage that accumulates over time. But there is an even deeper detail that Carnegie noticed, something that explains why some people, even when they have opportunities, still fail to prosper: the fear of thinking big. This fear appears silently. It does not present itself as fear. It presents itself as moderation, as realism, as prudence. People say things like, "I don't want much, just enough. I prefer something simple. I don't need that much." On the surface, these phrases seem humble, but many times they hide a mental limitation, because thinking small rarely produces big results. Carnegie believed that great achievements begin when someone allows themselves to imagine bigger possibilities, not as fantasy, but as a goal, as a direction. This does not mean everything will happen immediately, but it means the mind begins to work towards something greater. When someone thinks big, they begin to search for bigger paths, bigger partnerships, bigger projects. Meanwhile, those who think small rarely explore these possibilities, because their own vision imposes limits before they even try. Carnegie used to say that one of the greatest tragedies in life is not failure. It is never attempting something big enough, because many people live their entire lives inside invisible boundaries, boundaries that were never imposed by anyone else. They were imposed by their own minds. And it was precisely by breaking these boundaries that Carnegie began to build something that few people imagined was possible. He began to see industry not only as work, but as a system that could grow, scale, multiply. While many entrepreneurs focused only on daily operations, Carnegie began thinking about structure, about controlling entire stages of the production chain, about making the business more efficient, faster, more profitable. This kind of strategic thinking is what would later allow him to build one of the greatest industrial empires in history. But there is one final mindset that Andrew Carnegie considered perhaps the most dangerous of all, a mindset that silently prevents millions of people from prospering. And the most curious part is that it often looks like a virtue. In fact, many people believe they are doing the right thing when they adopt this mindset. But without realizing it, they are completely blocking their own growth. And understanding this mindset can completely change the way someone sees money, work, and prosperity.